The orc woman's hands did not shake as she scraped the last of the stew into a clay bowl, though her stomach had been growling for 2 days straight. Elara Jensen had learned long ago that hunger was just another kind of cold, something you could wrap yourself around and endure until it passed. And besides, she had eaten on first day and would eat again on 5th day, which meant she only had 3 more days to wait. The Copper Kettle Inn smelled like roasted chicken and fresh bread every single hour of every single day, a particular kind of torture she had not anticipated when she took the job washing dishes and peeling vegetables. But the coin was honest, and her employer asked no questions about the green tint of her skin, or the small tusks that pressed against her lower lip when she forgot to keep her mouth carefully closed. Lucas Keller stood at the main stove with his sleeves rolled up to his elbows, stirring a pot large enough to bathe a child in, and he was singing something off-key about a merchant's daughter and a sailing ship. He sang while he cooked, while he served, while he tallied the books in the evening, a constant stream of cheerful noise that had bewildered Elara for the first week, until she realized it was simply who he was. The man seemed incapable of silence or stillness, always moving, always talking, always offering another cup of cider or another slice of pie to travelers who looked like they could not afford it. "Elara, taste this and tell me if it needs more salt," Lucas called over his shoulder, holding out a wooden spoon dripping with gravy. She set down the bowl she had been scrubbing and dried her hands on her apron, crossing the kitchen in 4 long strides. The kitchen was her favorite place in the inn, warm and bright with copper pots hanging from the ceiling and bundles of dried herbs turning the air sweet and sharp at the same time. She took the spoon carefully, making sure their fingers did not touch, and tasted the gravy. It was perfect, rich and savory with just a hint of thyme, and her mouth flooded with saliva so quickly she almost choked. "It is good," she said, handing the spoon back. Her voice came out rougher than she intended, scraped raw by want. Lucas frowned at the pot, then at her, then back at the pot. "You think so? I do not know, something seems off. Maybe I added the flour too fast." He ladled a generous portion over a thick slice of bread and set it on a plate, then slid it across the wooden counter toward her. "Here, have a proper taste and tell me what you think." "I cannot serve this to customers if it is not right." Elara stared at the plate. The bread was still steaming, the gravy pooling in golden brown rivers across the surface, and she could see bits of mushroom and onion studded throughout. Her fingers curled into her palms. "It is fine, truly." "I should finish the dishes." "The dishes can wait 2 minutes." Lucas was already turning back to his stove, dismissing the matter as settled. "Eat that and give me an honest opinion. You have got a better palate than half my customers anyway." She wanted to refuse. She should refuse, because accepting food outside her carefully rationed meals was how you lost track of money, how you ended up short when the debt collector came around. But her hands picked up the plate anyway, and she ate standing by the washing tubs, forcing herself to take small bites and chew slowly when everything in her body screamed to devour it all at once. The gravy was perfect, and Lucas had known it was perfect, which meant this was charity dressed up as a favor, and she should feel insulted, but instead felt something warm and painful lodged beneath her breastbone. Lucas hummed his way through 3 more songs while she finished the dishes. The evening crowd was lighter than usual, just a handful of locals and one traveling family who had taken the large corner table. Elara could hear Lucas chatting with them through the kitchen doorway, asking about their journey and recommending the lamb stew, his voice carrying that particular tone of genuine interest that made people smile, even when they were tired and footsore. She had never met anyone who seemed to actually like every single person he encountered, as though the world was full of fascinating strangers just waiting to become friends. It made no sense to her. People were dangerous, unpredictable, quick to turn on you the moment they decided you were not worth their kindness. She had learned that lesson young and had it reinforced when her husband died, and his family made it clear that an orc widow with no children and no property could find her own way in the world. But Lucas treated everyone the same, from the wealthy merchant to the beggar who sometimes slept in the stable, and she could not figure out if he was a fool or a saint or something else entirely. "Elara, I am heading to the market early tomorrow," Lucas said, poking his head into the kitchen an hour later. "Do you want to come along? You have got a good eye for vegetables, and I always end up buying things just because the seller looks sad." She glanced up from the pot she was scouring. "You do not need to include me in your errands." "I know I do not need to. I am asking if you want to." He leaned against the doorframe, easy and relaxed, as though they were friends instead of employer and hired help. "Besides, you know more about root vegetables than I ever will. Last week I bought turnips thinking they were parsnips and served them in a dessert tart. The looks on people's faces were something to behold. Despite herself, Elara felt her mouth twitch toward a smile. "How did you mistake turnips for parsnips?" "In my defense, they are both pale and root-shaped." Lucas grinned, completely unashamed. "So is that a yes? I will come," she said, and tried not to notice how pleased he looked. The market was crowded and loud, full of people hawking everything from live chickens to imported spices, and Elara kept close to Lucas as they wound through the stalls. She had pulled her shawl up to shadow her face, tucking her hair back to hide her pointed ears, but she still caught stares and whispers. A group of human women clutched their baskets tighter as she passed, and a man selling apples watched her with narrowed eyes until Lucas stopped to buy half his stock and chatted about the weather until the tension bled away. "Those carrots look good," Lucas said, pointing to a vegetable stall run by an elderly woman with flour-dusted hands. "What do you think?" Elara moved closer, examining the bundles. "These 3 are fresh, but those have started to soften. You want the ones with the brightest color and the firmest stems." Lucas bought the fresh ones and 2 extra bundles besides, plus a sack of onions and a wheel of cheese that cost more than Elara made in a week. She watched him count out coins with the easy carelessness of someone who had never had to choose between food and rent, and felt that familiar twist of envy and longing. He was handsome in an open, friendly way, with brown hair that curled at the ends and hazel eyes that crinkled when he smiled. He was kind and generous and treated her like a person instead of a creature. And she had absolutely no right to the flutter in her chest every time he said her name, because men like Lucas Keller did not fall in love with orc widows who rationed their meals and counted every copper. "Let me carry some of that," she said, reaching for one of the sacks. "I have got it. You just point me toward anything else we need." Lucas shifted the bags in his arms, juggling them with the ease of long practice. "Oh, there is the honey cellar. The inn is nearly out, and people complain if I do not have honey for the morning porridge." They spent another hour winding through the market, and by the time they headed back toward the inn, Lucas was laden with enough supplies to feed a small army. Elara carried 2 sacks despite his protests, her longer stride keeping easy pace with his. The road back was less crowded, lined with oak trees just starting to turn gold and orange at the edges. Autumn was settling in, bringing cooler nights and the promise of winter beyond. "Can I ask you something?" Lucas said suddenly. Elara tensed. Questions were almost always dangerous. "You may ask." "Why do you only eat twice a week?" She nearly stumbled. Her grip tightened on the sacks until her knuckles ached. "I eat enough, Elara." His voice was gentle, no accusation in it, just concern. "I run an inn. I know what it looks like when someone is going hungry and you barely touch food except on first day and fifth day. If the wages are not enough, the wages are fine," she cut him off, more sharply than she intended. They had reached the inn's back entrance, and she set the sacks down harder than necessary. "I am managing my coin, that is all. It is none of your concern." Lucas set his own bags down and turned to face her fully. "You are right, it is not my concern. But you are a good worker and a decent person, and I do not like seeing you suffer when I have a kitchen full of food." "I am not suffering." The lie tasted bitter. "I am doing what I need to do." "Because of a debt?" He asked it quietly, a guess that landed too close to the truth. Elara looked away. "It is my debt to settle." "All right." Lucas did not push, did not pry further, just picked up his bags and headed inside. "But if you change your mind and want to talk about it, I am around." She stood in the doorway a moment longer, watching him unpack supplies and hum another off-key tune, and felt something crack open inside her chest. She had not cried when her husband died, or when his family turned her out, or when she spent 3 nights sleeping in a barn before she found work. But Lucas Keller's uncomplicated kindness made her throat ache and her eyes burn, and she hated him a little bit for it. The next morning, Elara arrived at the kitchen to find a plate of scrambled eggs and toast sitting on the counter beside the washing tubs. "Made too much," Lucas called from the pantry, his voice muffled. "Hate to waste it." She stared at the plate. It was not first day or fifth day. This was not one of her eating days. But the eggs were still steaming, and she had woken up dizzy with hunger. So she ate them standing up, and tried not to feel like she was accepting something she could not repay. The pattern continued. The next day it was a bowl of porridge with honey. Too much made again. What a shame to throw it out. The day after that, half a loaf of bread that had supposedly burned on one side, though when Elara inspected it, she found only the faintest darkening that would not have stopped anyone from buying it. Lucas always had an excuse, always delivered with a casual shrug, and Elara let herself accept the food because the alternative was watching it go to waste, and that would be worse, wouldn't it? She knew what he was doing. She was not stupid or naive enough to miss the pattern. But she let it happen anyway, and every time he slid a plate toward her with some flimsy excuse, she fell a little more in love with him and hated herself a little more for it. "You are a terrible liar," she told him one morning, holding up a perfectly good apple tart that he claimed had been dropped and could not be served. Lucas looked up from the dough he was kneading, flour dusting his forearms. "What do you mean? This tart is flawless. Not a single mark on it." "Must have been a different one I was thinking of." He returned his attention to the dough, working it with practiced efficiency. "But since that one is already out, you might as well eat it. Save me the trouble of finding room in the display case." Elara bit into the tart. It was perfect, buttery and sweet with just a hint of cinnamon, and she closed her eyes briefly to savor it. When she opened them again, Lucas was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for all of it." His face softened. "You do not need to thank me for feeding you, Elara. It is just food." But it was not just food, and they both knew it. It was kindness and attention and care, things she had not experienced since before her husband died, and every offering felt like a small declaration she did not know how to answer. The days grew shorter and colder. Elara learned the rhythm of the inn, the morning rush when locals came in for porridge and eggs, the quiet afternoon lull, the evening crowd that arrived smelling of horses and road dust. She learned that Lucas gave free meals to anyone who looked truly desperate, that he let the blacksmith's apprentice sleep in the back room when the boy's master was in a drunken rage, that he extended credit to half the village and rarely pressed for payment. She learned that his kindness was not reserved for her alone, which should have been a comfort, but instead felt like a small, selfish disappointment. She also learned that the inn was struggling. She noticed it in small ways at first: the way Lucas winced when he counted the till at night, the way he watered down the ale more than he should have, the increasingly threadbare state of the table linens. Then one evening, while taking out the washing water, she overheard him arguing with a man in the alley behind the inn. "I need another month," Lucas was saying, his usual cheer strained thin. "The harvest crowd will come through soon and business always picks up then. You said that last month." The other man's voice was hard and flat. "I have been patient, Keller, but my patience has limits. You owe me 30 gold crowns, and if I do not see at least half of that by the end of the season, I will be taking ownership of this establishment." Elara froze, the washing bucket heavy in her hands. "You will get your money," Lucas said. "I just need a little more time. End of the season, not a day later." Footsteps retreated down the alley, and then Lucas was alone, slumped against the wall with his head tipped back and his eyes closed. Elara set the bucket down carefully. 30 gold crowns. That was an enormous debt, more than twice what she owed to her late husband's cousin. And Lucas was feeding her extra meals every day, giving away free food, extending credit he could not afford. The realization hit her like cold water. He was drowning, and he was still trying to save everyone else. She stepped back inside before he could see her, her mind racing. Her own debt was 7 gold crowns, owed for the burial expenses her husband's family had covered, and then demanded repayment for. She had been sending them 1 crown every 2 months, scraping by on almost nothing, and at that rate she would be free in another year. But if the inn failed, she would have no job at all, and then where would she be? More than that, though, was the sick feeling in her stomach at the thought of Lucas losing everything. He did not deserve that. He was good and kind and foolish in the best possible way, and the world needed more people like him, not fewer. She lay awake that night in the tiny room above the kitchen that Lucas let her use, staring at the ceiling beams and running calculations in her head. If she stopped sending money to her husband's family, if she saved every copper, if she could somehow find a way to bring in more income for the inn, maybe she could help. It was a ridiculous thought. An orc widow with barely enough to feed herself trying to save a failing inn, but the alternative was unacceptable. The next morning, she studied the inn's operations with new eyes. The problem was not the quality of the food or the service, it was the price. Lucas charged too little and gave away too much, his generosity eroding his profits until there was nothing left. But she could not tell him to stop being kind. That would be like telling him to stop breathing. She needed a different solution. "Lucas," she said that afternoon, catching him between the lunch and dinner preparations, "do you ever do special occasion meals, wedding parties, festivals, that sort of thing?" He looked up from the chicken he was butchering. "I used to back when my parents ran the place." "Why?" "Because you could charge more for those. A lot more. People expect to pay well for celebration meals, and you have the skill to make something truly special." She leaned against the counter, warming to the idea. "The harvest festival is in 3 weeks. What if you offered a premium feast? Multi-course, fancy presentation, limited seating. You could charge 5 times your normal rate and people would pay it." Lucas considered this, his knife pausing mid-cut. "That is not a bad idea, actually, but I do not have the money to buy the kind of ingredients that would justify those prices. Imported wine, expensive cuts of meat, that sort of thing. What if we started smaller? A special menu using local ingredients but prepared in elegant ways. You do not need exotic spices to make something impressive. You need technique and presentation. Elara had watched her mother do this back before the war, when orc families still celebrated seasonal festivals with elaborate meals. And I can help. I know how to make butter sculptures, how to clarify consommé, how to plate dishes so they look like art. His face lit up, that genuine smile that made her heart stutter. You have been holding out on me. Why did you not mention you had formal training? You hired me to wash dishes, not to cook. She shrugged, trying to seem casual. But if it would help the inn, I am willing to do more. Help the inn? Lucas laughed, but there was something uncertain in his eyes. What makes you think the inn needs help? Elara held his gaze. I heard you talking to your creditor. I know about the debt. The smile dropped from his face. He set down the knife and wiped his hands on his apron, not looking at her. That is not your problem to solve. Neither was my hunger, but you made it your problem anyway. She kept her voice even, matter of fact. Let me do this. Let me help you the way you helped me. Lucas was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. I did not feed you because I expected repayment, Elara. I did it because you were hungry and I had food. That is all. I know. And she did know, which was exactly why she had to help him. Because he gave without expecting anything back, which meant he would give until there was nothing left of himself. But I am offering anyway. We can do this together. He met her eyes and something passed between them, an understanding that went deeper than words. All right, he said finally. Let us try it. They spent the next 2 weeks planning the Harvest Festival feast. Elara drew up a menu that showcased Lucas's strengths while staying within their limited budget. Roasted root vegetables glazed with honey and herbs, chicken braised in cider with mushrooms, a savory tart layered with cheese and caramelized onions, apple cake with cream. Nothing exotic or expensive, but everything prepared with care and presented beautifully. Lucas spread word through the village, and to their surprise, all 20 seats sold out within 3 days at the premium price. People are excited, Lucas reported, coming back from the market with a broad grin. Old Marta said she has not seen anything this fancy since the Baron's wedding feast 10 years ago. Elara looked up from the carrots she was cutting into delicate flower shapes. Then we had better make sure it lives up to the expectations. The day of the feast arrived with crisp autumn weather and brilliant blue skies. Elara and Lucas worked side by side in the kitchen, moving around each other with an ease that surprised them both. She would start a task, and he would finish it. Or he would season something, and she would taste and nod approval. A silent conversation conducted entirely through cooking. The kitchen filled with the smells of roasting meat and baking pastry, and for the first time since her husband died, Elara felt like she was part of something again, like she belonged. How do these look? Lucas asked, holding out a plate of the vegetable tarts. Elara inspected them critically. The pastry was golden and flaky, the vegetables arranged in a spiral pattern she had taught him. Perfect. People are going to love them. We make a good team. He said it casually, but there was weight behind the words. Yes, Elara agreed quietly. We do. The feast was a triumph. Guests arrived dressed in their finest clothes and exclaimed over every course, praising the flavors and the presentation. Lucas worked the dining room with his usual charm while Elara stayed in the kitchen, preferring to avoid the stares and whispers her presence would provoke. But she could hear the laughter and conversation drifting back, the sounds of people enjoying themselves, and felt a quiet pride. They had done this together. When the last guest departed and the kitchen was finally clean, Lucas counted out the evening's earnings and let out a low whistle. This is 3 times what we make in a normal week. Elara, this was brilliant. She allowed herself a small smile. It was your cooking that sold it. I just helped with the planning. No, it was both of us. He set the coins down and looked at her directly. I could not have done this without you. And I think we should do it again. Make it a regular thing once a month. We could pull ourselves out of debt if we keep this up. The word "we" sent warmth through her chest. I would like that. They fell into a new routine. Once a month they held a special feast, and between those events, Elara worked on tightening the inn's other operations. She negotiated with suppliers, pointing out when vegetables were past their prime and refusing to pay full price. She reorganized the pantry to reduce waste, making sure ingredients were used in the order they would spoil. She taught Lucas how to portion meals more carefully, how to make the expensive ingredients stretch further without sacrificing quality. It was the kind of ruthless efficiency she had learned from necessity, and Lucas watched her work with something like awe. "You are remarkable," he told her one evening. They were sitting in the kitchen after closing, sharing a pot of tea. "I have been running this inn for 5 years and barely keeping my head above water, and you show up and turn everything around in a matter of weeks." Elara wrapped her hands around her mug, feeling the warmth seep into her palms. "You were too generous. Someone needed to balance it out." "Maybe." Lucas smiled, but it was tinged with something sad. "My parents always said I had more heart than sense. They loved this place, you know, built it from nothing, made it the center of the community. When they died and left it to me, I was so determined to keep it going exactly as they had. But I think I confused their kindness with their business sense. They knew how to be generous and still turn a profit. I never learned that balance." It was the most he had ever said about himself, and Elara listened carefully, filing away each detail. "You are learning it now. With your help." He looked at her over the rim of his mug, his eyes serious. "I do not know what I did to deserve you walking into my inn, but I am grateful for it." Her breath caught. She should say something light, deflect the intensity of the moment, but instead she found herself speaking from the heart. "You fed me when I was hungry. You treated me like I mattered when the rest of the world made it clear I did not. That is what you did." Lucas reached across the table and very gently covered her hand with his. His palm was warm and calloused from years of kitchen work, and Elara stared at their joined hands like she had never seen such a thing before. "You do matter," he said softly. "To this inn, to the business, to me. I hope you know that." She should pull her hand away. She should reinforce the boundaries between employer and employee, should protect herself from the inevitable heartbreak of wanting something she could never have. But his hand was warm and his eyes were kind, and she was so tired of being alone. "I know," she whispered. They sat like that for a long moment, the kitchen quiet around them except for the crackle of the fire in the stove. Then Lucas squeezed her hand gently and pulled back, the moment breaking like a soap bubble. "We should get some rest," he said, his voice a little rough. "Tomorrow will be busy." Elara nodded and stood, gathering the mugs to wash them. But as she worked, she could still feel the phantom warmth of his hand on hers, and she knew she was in far deeper than was safe. Winter arrived with the first snow, and the inn's fortunes continued to improve. Word of the monthly feasts had spread, and now people traveled from neighboring villages to attend. Lucas paid down half his debt and stopped looking quite so haunted when he counted the till. Elara saved enough to send a large payment to her husband's family, reducing what she owed to just 3 gold crowns. Everything was working out better than she had dared to hope, but she also noticed things that worried her. Lucas still gave away free meals more often than he should, still let people run up tabs he would never collect on. And he was looking thinner, his face a bit more drawn, the shadows under his eyes darker. One morning she found him in the pantry eating stale bread for breakfast, and when she asked why, he shrugged and said he had not gotten around to making anything else. "You are lying," she said flatly. You always make breakfast. What is going on? Nothing is going on. I just was not that hungry this morning. He tried to move past her, but she blocked the doorway. Lucas, tell me the truth. He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. It is nothing, really, just trying to keep costs down. We are doing well, but we are not out of danger yet, and every bit of savings helps. Elara felt cold realization wash over her. You are rationing your own meals. While you have been feeding me extra food every single day, you have been going without. It is not that dramatic. But he would not meet her eyes. I eat enough. How often? She kept her voice level, but fury was building in her chest. How many meals a day have you been eating, Elara? It is fine. How many? He looked at her finally, and there was resignation in his face. 1. Maybe 2 if it has been a busy day and there are leftovers. She wanted to hit him. She wanted to shake him until his teeth rattled. Instead, she pushed past him into the kitchen and started pulling ingredients from the shelves with sharp, angry movements. Eggs, butter, bread, cheese. She lit the stove with more force than necessary and cracked eggs into a pan, whisking them hard enough that bits splattered on the counter. What are you doing? Lucas asked, hovering in the doorway. Making you breakfast. Sit down. I said I am fine. Sit down, Lucas. She did not raise her voice, but something in her tone made him obey. He sank into a chair at the small kitchen table, watching her with wary confusion. Elara cooked in furious silence, scrambling the eggs with cheese and herbs, toasting thick slices of bread, pouring a generous glass of milk. She plated everything and set it in front of him with a thump. Eat. All of it. Lucas looked at the plate, then at her. This is too much for just me. Then I will make another plate for myself and we will eat together, but you are not leaving this table until that food is gone. She suited actions to words, making herself a matching plate and sitting down across from him. You have spent months feeding me, worrying about me, making sure I did not go hungry. And the entire time you were starving yourself. Do you have any idea how that makes me feel? I was not starving. You are eating 1 meal a day while doing the physical labor of running an inn. That is starving, Lucas. That is exactly what I was doing, and you saw it was wrong when I did it, so how is it any different when you do it? He poked at the eggs with his fork. It is different because I was trying to save the inn. It is my responsibility, my debt. And my debt was my responsibility, but you fed me anyway. Elara leaned forward, catching his gaze and holding it. You cannot save everyone else and sacrifice yourself. That is not noble. It is stupid. A smile tugged at his mouth despite everything. Stupid, incredibly stupid, monumentally stupid, the kind of stupid that makes me want to shake sense into you. She stabbed at her own eggs, suddenly self-conscious about her outburst. You matter too, Lucas. Your health matters. Your life matters. And if you destroy yourself trying to save this inn, then what is the point? He was quiet for a moment, then started eating. She watched him take the first few bites, saw the way he closed his eyes briefly like the food was the best thing he had ever tasted, and her anger drained away into something softer and more painful. I am sorry, Lucas said quietly. You are right. I just got so focused on keeping the inn afloat that I stopped thinking about anything else, but that was wrong and I should not have worried you. You did worry me. Elara pushed the words out past the tightness in her throat. When I found out, I was terrified. Because she stopped, the confession hovering on her tongue, too dangerous to speak. Because you what? His voice was gentle, coaxing. Because I care about you. It came out barely above a whisper. More than I should, more than is safe. Lucas set down his fork. Why would caring about me not be safe? Because men like you do not fall in love with women like me. The words tumbled out in a rush, all the fear and longing she had been holding back for months. You are human and kind and good, and I am an orc widow with nothing to offer but debts and a capacity for surviving. You could have anyone, Lucas, someone beautiful and whole and uncomplicated. Why would you ever choose me, Elara?" He said her name like it mattered, like it was something precious. "Do you really think I have not noticed how I feel about you? I have been half in love with you since the second week you worked here, when you told that rude customer exactly what you thought of his complaints about the soup temperature. You were magnificent, all righteous fury and sharp edges, and I thought, that is someone I want in my corner." She stared at him. "You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious." He pushed his plate aside and leaned forward, his eyes intent on hers. "You are smart and capable and fierce. You turned this whole inn around with your planning and your thriftiness and your refusal to let me fail. You make me laugh and you keep me honest, and you are beautiful in ways that have nothing to do with what you look like, though for the record, I think you are lovely. Green skin, tusks, pointed ears and all. Why would I want anyone else when you are right here?" Elara felt tears pricking at her eyes and blinked them back furiously. "You are going to break my heart. Not if I can help it." Lucas reached across the table again, taking her hand in both of his. "I know I am not perfect. I give away too much and I do not always think things through, and clearly I have some self-destructive tendencies we need to work on. But I promise you, Elara, if you give me a chance, I will do everything I can to make you happy. We will figure it out together, just like we have been doing with the inn." "Together," she repeated, testing the word. It had been so long since she had been part of a together that she had almost forgotten what it felt like. Together. Lucas squeezed her hand. "What do you say?" "She should be cautious. She should protect herself, keep her walls up, remember all the ways love could hurt you." But Lucas was looking at her like she was something miraculous, and his hands were warm around hers, and she was so very tired of being alone. "Yes," she said, and watched his face light up like the sun breaking through clouds. "Yes, I will try this with you." He stood and pulled her to her feet, and then his arms were around her, holding her close. Elara pressed her face against his shoulder and let herself lean into him, let herself be held. He smelled like flour and herbs and something distinctly him, and she thought maybe this was what safety felt like. "We are going to be fine," Lucas murmured into her hair. "Better than fine. We are going to be wonderful." And despite every reason she had to doubt, Elara found herself believing him. The rest of winter passed in a blur of work and small, perfect moments. They held their monthly feasts and built a reputation that drew travelers from 3 towns over. Lucas taught Elara how to make his mother's famous meat pies, and she taught him the orc recipe for spiced nuts that became the inn's most requested snack. They worked side by side every day, and at night they would sit together in the kitchen, talking about everything and nothing until the fire burned low. They did not hide their relationship exactly, but they were careful about it. Lucas, because he did not want anyone to think he was taking advantage of an employee. Elara, because she knew how people looked at interspecies couples and did not want to cause trouble for the inn. They were affectionate in private and professionally friendly in public, and for a while it seemed like that would be enough. Then came the morning a traveling merchant made a comment about the orc woman working in the back, his tone making it clear he thought her presence was distasteful. Lucas, who had been serving the man his breakfast with his usual cheerful politeness, set the plate down with enough force to rattle the silverware. "That orc woman is the reason this inn is still standing," he said, his voice pleasant but his eyes hard. "She is a better cook than I will ever be, a brilliant manager, and the kindest person I have ever met. So if you have a problem with her, you are welcome to take your business elsewhere." The merchant sputtered. "I was just making an observation, and I am making one too. The door is behind you. Use it." Elara, watching from the kitchen doorway, felt her heart swell painfully in her chest. The merchant left, muttering about standards and propriety, and Lucas turned to find her staring at him. "What?" he asked, suddenly self-conscious. "You did not have to do that." He was a paying customer. He was a bigot, and I do not need his money that badly. Lucas crossed to her, taking her hands in his. "I will not let anyone disrespect you, Elara. Not in this inn, not in front of me. You are too important." She pulled him down and kissed him for the first time, there in the doorway with the morning sun streaming through the windows. It was not a particularly graceful kiss, complicated by the difference in their heights and her tusks, but it was warm and real and perfect in its imperfection. When they finally broke apart, Lucas was grinning. "What was that for?" "For being exactly who you are." Elara touched his face gently, tracing the line of his jaw. "For defending me, for choosing me." "Always," he promised, and kissed her again. Spring brought warmer weather and increased business. The inn's reputation continued to grow, and Lucas was able to pay off his debt entirely by the first week of the season. He came into the kitchen waving the receipt like a banner, whooping with joy, and swept Elara up in a spinning embrace that made her laugh despite herself. "We did it," he crowed. "The inn is ours, free and clear. No more creditors, no more midnight panics about losing everything." "We actually did it." "We did," Elara agreed, smiling at his exuberance. Her own debt had been cleared 2 weeks earlier, the final payment sent to her late husband's family, along with a short letter stating she wanted no further contact with them. She was free too, finally, from all the weights that had been dragging her down. "So what happens now?" Lucas set her down but kept his arms around her waist. "Now we figure out what we want the future to look like. Together, remember, together." The word still felt precious every time she said it. "What do you want, Lucas?" He considered the question seriously. "I want to keep running the inn. I want to keep doing the monthly feasts and maybe expand to other special events. I want to build something permanent and good that helps people." He paused, his eyes searching her face. "And I want you beside me for all of it, as my partner in every sense of the word." Elara's breath caught. "Lucas, I am not proposing, not yet," he said quickly. "I know we should take our time, do this properly. But I want you to know that is where my head is. You are not just my employee or my girlfriend or whatever other label we put on this. You are the person I want to build a life with." She had never expected to have this again, a future with someone who saw her as an equal and a partner. After her husband died, she had assumed she would spend the rest of her life alone, working whatever jobs she could find and scraping by on the margins. But Lucas was offering her something else entirely, a real partnership built on mutual respect and affection, and she wanted it so badly it frightened her. "I want that too," she said, and felt the truth of it settle into her bones. "I want to build something with you." His smile could have lit the entire inn. "Then let us make it official. Come be my business partner. We will split the profits, make decisions together, build this place into something amazing. You want me as an equal partner." Elara had assumed she would always be the employee, the helper. This was far more than she had imagined. "Of course I do. You have put just as much work into saving this place as I have, probably more. It would not be right any other way." Lucas squeezed her hands. "Besides, I have proven I cannot be trusted to run this place alone. I need your good sense to balance out my questionable decisions." "Your decisions are not all questionable," Elara said, but she was smiling. "Most of them are, but not all. See, this is exactly why I need you as a partner. Someone has to keep me honest." He pulled her close again, resting his forehead against hers. "Say yes, Elara, let us do this together." "Yes," she said, and felt the last of her defenses crumble away. "Yes to all of it." They went to the village clerk the next day, and had the partnership papers drawn up, making Elara a legal half-owner of the Copper Kettle Inn. The clerk, an older man with ink-stained fingers, raised his eyebrows when he saw them but made no comment, just filed the papers and stamped them with his official seal. Walking out of his office, Elara felt like she was floating. She owned something. She had a stake in something permanent. She mattered. "We should celebrate," Lucas said, practically bouncing with excitement. "A special dinner, just the two of us. I will make that roast duck you loved last month, and we can open one of the good bottles of wine." "That sounds perfect." Elara laced her fingers through his as they walked back to the inn, not caring who saw. They were business partners now. It was perfectly appropriate for them to be seen together. And if some people gave them disapproving looks, well, they would just have to get used to it. Summer settled over the village in a blanket of heat and golden sunshine. The inn thrived, busier than it had been in years, and Elara and Lucas worked together with the easy synchronization of a long married couple. They hired 2 more kitchen helpers to keep up with demand, and one of them was another orc, a young woman named Kara who nearly cried when Elara offered her the job. Knowing she could provide the same kind of lifeline that Lucas had given her filled Elara with a fierce satisfaction. On one particularly sweltering afternoon, when the lunch rush had finally cleared and the kitchen helpers were taking a break, Lucas pulled Elara into the pantry and closed the door. "What are you doing?" she asked, laughing. "We have work to do." "The work can wait 5 minutes." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheeks. "I just needed a moment alone with you. I feel like we have been so busy lately that I barely get to see you even though we are together all day." Elara leaned into his touch, her eyes drifting closed. "I know what you mean. But this is good, Lucas. The inn is doing well, we are helping people, we are building something that matters. I know. And I love it, I do. But I also love you, and sometimes I just want to stop and appreciate that fact without an audience." He kissed her softly, carefully, mindful of her tusks. "Have I told you today how incredible you are?" "Not yet." She smiled against his mouth. "But you can tell me now if you like. You are incredible. Brilliant and strong and everything I could have ever wanted. I am the luckiest man in the world to have you as my partner." "Business partner," she teased, but her heart was singing. "That too." Lucas kissed her again, deeper this time, but mostly just partner, in everything. They stayed in the pantry for longer than 5 minutes, stealing sweetness in the dim, cool space surrounded by sacks of flour and hanging herbs. When they finally emerged, both flushed and rumpled, Kara took one look at them and grinned but said nothing. As summer faded toward autumn, Lucas started acting oddly. He was distracted, frequently lost in thought, and Elara caught him staring at her with an expression of intense concentration more than once. She asked if something was wrong, if the inn was having problems she did not know about, but he just smiled and said everything was fine. He was just thinking about the future. The truth came out on the evening of the Autumn Harvest Festival. The village was decorated with colored lanterns and garlands of late-blooming flowers, and the Copper Kettle was hosting a feast for 40 people, their largest event yet. Elara and Lucas worked frantically all day, cooking and plating and coordinating the kitchen helpers, and by the time the last course was served, they were both exhausted. "Go sit down for a minute," Lucas urged, practically pushing Elara toward the small table in the corner of the kitchen. "You have been on your feet for 12 hours. Take a break." "So have you," she pointed out, but she sat anyway because her legs were aching. Lucas disappeared into the pantry and came back with a covered plate. He set it in front of her and pulled the cover off with a flourish. "Ta-da!" Elara stared. It was a perfectly plated meal, roast chicken with glazed carrots and fresh bread, arranged beautifully. "Lucas, this is lovely, but I ate earlier. Just humor me." He sat down across from her, his hands folded on the table, watching her with that same intense expression. "Eat. Please." She picked up her fork, puzzled by his behavior, and took a bite of chicken. It was delicious, perfectly seasoned and cooked to tender perfection. She took another bite and another while Lucas watched in silence. It was only when she was halfway through the meal that she realized what he was doing. She had eaten full meals before, of course. Once she started earning proper wages and her debt started shrinking, she had stopped rationing so severely. But this was different. This was Lucas, sitting across from her at his own table, watching her eat without flinching, without the desperate edge of worry that had characterized their early days. This was them, partners and equals, sharing a meal together because they chose to, because they were safe and stable and had enough. Lara set down her fork, her eyes stinging. "Lucas, I love you," he said simply. "I have loved you for months, probably since the beginning if I am being honest. And I want to spend the rest of my life with you, building this inn and making meals together and facing whatever comes our way as a team." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box, setting it on the table between them. "So I am asking, properly this time, if you will marry me." She opened the box with shaking hands. Inside was a ring, simple silver with a small green stone that matched her skin tone. It was not expensive or elaborate, but it was thoughtful and beautiful and so perfectly Lucas that she felt her throat close up entirely. "You really want to marry me?" The words came out thick and unsteady. "Even though I am an orc, even though people will talk, even though it will be complicated. I want to marry you because you are you," Lucas said firmly. "I do not care what anyone else thinks. I care about you and me and the life we are building together. So yes, I really want to marry you, if you will have me." Elara looked at the ring, at Lucas's hopeful face, at the comfortable kitchen around them that they had saved and rebuilt together. She thought about the woman she had been when she first arrived, hungry and desperate and convinced she would always be alone. And she thought about the woman she was now, fed and safe and loved. "Yes," she said, and watched joy break across his face like sunrise. "Yes, I will marry you." Lucas surged out of his chair and pulled her into his arms, lifting her off the ground and spinning them both in a circle. She laughed, clinging to his shoulders, and when he set her down, he immediately started kissing her face, her cheeks, her forehead, her mouth, like he could not decide where to start. "I love you," he said between kisses. "I love you so much. You have made me happier than I ever thought possible." "I love you too." The words felt strange and wonderful on her tongue, a gift she had not expected to give again. "You saved my life, Lucas. In every way that matters, you saved my life." He pulled back just enough to look at her, his hands cradling her face. "We saved each other. That is how this works." And she supposed he was right. She had come to his inn starving and alone, and he had fed her. But he had been drowning in debt and poor decisions, and she had given him the skills and support to save himself. They had rescued each other, bit by bit, meal by meal, until they had built something neither of them could have managed alone. Lucas slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. They were married 6 weeks later in a small ceremony at the inn, with the kitchen helpers and some of the regular customers as witnesses. The village priest had declined to perform the ceremony, citing religious concerns about interspecies marriage, so they had a traveling magistrate do it instead, a practical woman who seemed far more interested in the legal paperwork than their species differences. Elara wore a simple green dress that Lucas said brought out her eyes, and he wore his best shirt with his hair neatly combed for once. They said their vows in front of the hearth in the main dining room, promising to love and support each other through whatever came. and when the magistrate pronounced them married, Lucas kissed her so thoroughly that several people cheered. The celebration afterward was exactly what Elara would have chosen, a large meal with everyone who mattered to them, good food and better company. She sat beside her husband and ate a full plate without counting the cost, surrounded by warmth and laughter, and felt happiness settle into her bones like coming home. "How does it feel to be married again?" Lucas asked, his arm around her shoulders. Elara leaned into him, considering. Her first marriage had been arranged, practical, affectionate, but not passionate. This was something else entirely, a choice made freely with someone who saw her fully and loved what he saw. "Right," she said finally. "It feels right." "Good." He kissed her temple. "Because you are stuck with me now. I think I can live with that." Winter came again, their first as a married couple. The inn had its best season yet, and they hired another cook to help with the increased demand. Elara discovered she was pregnant in early spring, which sent Lucas into a panic of excitement that lasted for 3 days, until she threatened to lock him out of the kitchen if he did not calm down. "I am going to be a father," he kept saying, like he could not quite believe it. "We are going to have a baby. A tiny person who is half you and half me. That is incredible. That is terrifying. How are you so calm about this? Someone has to be." But Elara was just as excited, though she hid it better. The idea of a child, a new life that she and Lucas had created together, filled her with wonder and fear in equal measure. She had always assumed she would not have children, that her chance had passed when her first husband died childless. This felt like a gift she had not earned. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Lucas fussed over her like she was made of glass. He insisted she rest more, work less, eat better, until she finally had to sit him down and explain that she was pregnant, not dying, and she would continue working as long as she felt able. "I just want to make sure you have everything you need," he said, looking genuinely distressed. "I need you to stop treating me like I am fragile," Elara replied, but she softened it with a kiss. "I am strong, Lucas. I can do this." "I know you are strong. You are the strongest person I know. But let me take care of you anyway. I like doing it." So she compromised, letting him take over the heavier kitchen work while she handled the planning and coordination. They prepared the small room next to their own to be a nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow and building a cradle from oak wood. Elara sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her hands suddenly clumsy with the delicate work, and Lucas read every book he could find about babies and child rearing. Their daughter was born on a warm summer morning, small and squalling and perfect. She had her mother's green skin and pointed ears, but her father's hazel eyes and the shape of his face. They named her Aria, and Lucas cried when he held her for the first time, great heaving sobs of joy that made Elara laugh even through her exhaustion. "She is so small," he whispered, cradling the baby like she might break. "How is something this small even possible?" Very carefully. Elara reached out to touch her daughter's tiny hand, and Aria's fingers curled around her mother's in an instinctive grip. "Hello, little one. Welcome to the world." Lucas looked up at her, his face wet with tears and shining with happiness. "Thank you. Thank you for her, for this, for everything." "We made her together," Elara reminded him. "This is ours, Lucas, all of it. The inn, the life we built our daughter, ours." "Ours," he agreed and leaned over to kiss her gently. "I love you so much, both of you." Aria turned out to be an easy baby, cheerful and curious, and they settled into the new rhythm of parenthood with surprising ease. The inn continued to thrive, and they hired more help so they could spend time with their daughter. Elara would work in the kitchen with Aria strapped to her back in a sling, the baby watching everything with wide, fascinated eyes, and Lucas would sing to her while he cooked, making up silly songs that made no sense but always made Arya smile. When Arya was 6 months old, Elara's former in-laws arrived at the inn. She recognized them immediately, her late husband's parents and his 2 brothers, all of them standing in the dining room with expressions of cold disapproval. Her stomach dropped. She had not seen them since they turned her out after the funeral, and she had no idea what they wanted now. "Can I help you?" Lucas asked, his innkeeper's smile in place but his eyes wary. He had come to stand beside Elara, one hand on the small of her back in silent support. "We are here to speak with Elara," the older man said, her former father-in-law stern and unyielding as ever. "Privately. Anything you have to say to my wife can be said in front of me," Lucas replied, his voice pleasant but firm. The old man's eyes narrowed. "Your wife. She is a widow. She has no right to remarry without her family's permission. I stopped being part of your family when you demanded I pay for my own husband's burial and then threw me out," Elara said, keeping her voice level with effort. "What do you want? We heard you have done well for yourself. Married a human, become part owner of this establishment." Her former mother-in-law spoke this time, her tone making it clear she found the whole situation distasteful. "We also heard you have a child, our grandchild by blood, since you carry our son's line." Elara felt ice wash through her veins. "Arya is my daughter and Lucas's daughter. She has nothing to do with you. She has orc blood, that makes her ours." One of the brothers stepped forward. "We have come to claim her. It is not right for her to be raised by a human away from her own kind. Get out." Lucas's voice was cold and hard, nothing like his usual warmth. "Get out of my inn right now before I throw you out. You cannot keep us from our family," the brother started, but Lucas cut him off. "She is not your family. You made that clear when you abandoned Elara and demanded she pay you back for your own son's funeral expenses. You have no claim on her, no claim on her daughter, and no right to be here. So I am telling you one more time, leave. Now." The 4 of them stood there for a long moment, tension crackling in the air. Then the old man turned and stalked out, his family following. But at the door he looked back. "This is not over. We will not let our blood be raised by a human." "Watch me," Elara said, and was pleased by how steady her voice sounded. "And if you try to take my daughter, I will make you regret it." They left, and Elara sagged against Lucas, her whole body shaking. He held her tight, one hand stroking her hair. "They cannot take her," he murmured. "We are married. The inn is in both our names. Arya was born after our marriage. Legally, they have no claim. I will talk to the magistrate tomorrow and make sure everything is documented properly. They do not care about legality." Elara pressed her face against his chest. "They care about control and appearance and bloodlines. They will keep pushing. Then we will keep pushing back." Lucas pulled away just enough to look at her. "I will not let anyone take our daughter, Elara. I promise you that. We have built a good life here. We have friends and allies, and we will protect our family." She believed him, but the encounter left her shaken for days. She found herself checking on Arya constantly, making sure the baby was safe, worrying every time someone unfamiliar came into the inn. Lucas was patient with her anxiety, helping her work through the fear until she could breathe normally again. The former in-laws did not come back, though Elara heard through village gossip that they had consulted with a lawyer and been told they had no legal recourse. It did not make her feel entirely safe, but it helped. And as months passed and nothing happened, she slowly relaxed back into the rhythm of her life. Arya grew into a bright, talkative toddler who loved helping in the kitchen, standing on a stool beside her parents and stirring bowls with intense concentration. She looked more orc than human, with her green skin and small tusks starting to emerge, but she had Lucas's personality, friendly and curious and charming. The inn's regular customers adored her, and she would make rounds of the tables during dinner service, chatting with everyone and stealing bites of food when she thought no one was looking. "She is going to be trouble when she gets older," Elara said one evening, watching Arya convince an elderly merchant to let her try his dessert. "She is trouble now," Lucas replied fondly. "She gets it from her mother. I am not trouble. You absolutely are, just a different kind." He slipped an arm around her waist. "But I like trouble, so it works out." When Arya was 3, Elara became pregnant again. This time it was twins, 2 boys who came early and small but healthy. They named them William and Adrian, and suddenly the inn was full of children's laughter and crying and chaos. Lucas loved it, taking to fatherhood like he had been born for it, and Elara found herself softer than she had ever been, more open, more willing to be vulnerable. Her children would not grow up the way she had, always uncertain and afraid. They would be safe and loved and know their worth. The inn continued to prosper. They expanded, adding more rooms and a larger kitchen, hiring a full staff. Elara trained the new cooks in her methods, teaching them efficiency and thrift without sacrificing quality. Lucas handled the front of house, greeting guests and making everyone feel welcome. They were a team in the truest sense, each complementing the other's strengths and supporting their weaknesses. On their 5th wedding anniversary, they closed the inn for the evening and had a private dinner, just the 2 of them. The children were being watched by Kara, who had become like a younger sister to Elara, and the inn was quiet for once. "Remember when you first started working here?" Lucas asked, refilling her wine glass. "You were so fierce and guarded. I was half convinced you were going to stab me if I said the wrong thing. I was not that bad. You absolutely were, but I liked it. You did not take anything from anyone, and you worked harder than anyone I had ever met." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I knew then that you were special. It just took me a while to work up the courage to do anything about it." Lara laced her fingers through his. "I thought you were insane. Who feeds a stranger extra meals every day and pretends it is an accident? It made no sense." "It made perfect sense to me." "You were hungry, I had food, end of story." Lucas smiled. "Though I will admit the accidental cooking mishaps were getting harder to justify after a while. The supposedly burnt loaf that was perfectly fine. That was a low point," he admitted. "I am not a good liar." "No, you are not. But you are a good man." Elara squeezed his hand. "The best man. You saved my life, Lucas. I was starving and alone and convinced I would die that way. And then you fed me and you cared about me and you gave me a reason to keep going. I would not be here without you." "We saved each other," Lucas said, echoing his words from years before. "I was drowning in debt and bad decisions and you pulled me out. You made me better, Elara, stronger and smarter and more capable. We built this life together." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of shared history settling between them. 5 years of marriage, nearly 7 years of knowing each other, and Elara still felt that flutter in her chest when Lucas smiled at her. "You ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Marrying me, I mean. Dealing with the stares and the comments and the occasional bigot who thinks we are wrong somehow." "Never." The answer came instantly, absolutely certain. "You and our children are the best thing that ever happened to me. I would endure 1,000 bigots for this life." "Good." Lucas stood and came around the table, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. "Because I plan on keeping you for a very long time." "Forever," Elara corrected, and kissed him. Years passed in a blur of full tables and happy customers and growing children. Arya started helping in the kitchen officially, learning her parents' recipes and adding her own creative touches. The twins were whirlwinds of energy, constantly getting into mischief and making everyone laugh. The inn became a cornerstone of the community, known throughout the region for its excellent food and warm hospitality. Elara's former in-laws never came back, though she heard they had moved to a different province. She did not miss them. Her real family was here, in this inn, in the man who still occasionally pretended to cook too much just to make her smile, in the children who filled their home with noise and joy. On an autumn evening much like the one when they first met, Elara stood in the kitchen watching Lucas cook dinner for their family. He was older now, lines around his eyes and silver threading through his brown hair, but his smile was the same. Their children were setting the table, bickering and laughing, and through the window she could see the inn's sign swinging gently in the breeze. Lucas looked up and caught her watching. "What are you thinking about? How far we have come." She moved to stand beside him, hip to hip in the familiar way of people who had been together for years. "How hungry I was when I first came here, and how full my life is now." He set down his spoon and turned to face her fully, his hands coming up to cup her face. "I love you. I will never get tired of saying that. I love you too." And she meant it with every fiber of her being, this man who had fed her when she was starving and loved her when she thought she was unlovable. "Thank you for cooking too much." Lucas laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Thank you for staying, for building this with me, for being my partner in everything." Arya called that dinner was ready, and they moved to the table together, sitting down with their children to share a meal. Elara filled her plate without thinking about cost or rations, taking generous portions of everything because she could, because they had enough, because she was safe and loved and home. As they ate, surrounded by her family and the inn they had built together, Elara thought back to that first day, when she had scraped stew into a bowl with shaking hands and convinced herself she could survive 3 more days until her next meal. She had been so small then, so diminished by hunger and hardship and loss. But Lucas had seen something worth saving in her, and he had fed her not just with food but with kindness and respect and love, until she had grown strong enough to save him right back. They had rescued each other, bit by bit, meal by meal. And in the process, they had built something neither of them could have imagined alone, a partnership, a family, a life full of warmth and laughter and more than enough food to go around. Lucas caught her eye across the table and smiled, that same easy, genuine smile that had first broken through her defenses. She smiled back, and in that moment, surrounded by the noise and chaos and perfect mess of their life together, Elara Keller knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. The Copper Kettle Inn thrived for decades, passed down eventually to Arya and her siblings, but that was far in the future. For now, there was just this: a family gathered around a table, sharing a meal they had made together, with full plates and fuller hearts. And that, Elara thought, was the best kind of happy ending there was.